Hi, my name is Angeline, and I'll be introducing the first past the post system in the UK and its origin. With me are my fellow group mates Ariel, who will be discussing the strengths of the first past the post system, Priscilla, who will be discussing the weaknesses of the system, Yuani and Ashley, who will be discussing the potential reforms that can be done towards this system, and finally, Ryan, who will be discussing the electoral systems in other Commonwealth nations and also will be concluding our presentation. The first past the post system is the main voting system that is used to elect members of parliament to the House of Commons in the UK. Studies have shown that the first past the post system is the second most widely used system in the world, with 27.65% of 270 countries using it, as illustrated in the graph above. The first past the post system is a kind of majority electoral system where voters select their preferred candidates and the candidate with the most votes wins. For the system to work, the United Kingdom has 650 constituencies, which corresponds to the number of members in the House of Commons in the Parliament. Then, in line with the majority election principles, one politician from each constituency wins and is granted a seat in the Parliament. The origin of this system lies in tradition. It is not a matter of law, but a past political practice. It is a common belief that the first past the post system has been the UK's consistent electoral system for centuries, but that is not the case. The uniform application of the first past the post system in single member constituencies for Westminster elections is a more recent development, largely solidified in the late 19th century when the Parliament of the United Kingdom was formed by the Act of Union in the 1800s. Voting was conducted by block voting, meaning voters voted for as many candidates as there were seats, and those with the most votes win. However, there were huge variations in the number of members of parliament chosen by each constituency, its size, and the franchise within each constituency compared to today. Back then, many constituencies, specifically English counties and boroughs, elected more than one representatives as members of parliament. On the other hand, the Scots and Welsh county and borough were represented by one member only, while Ireland's county was represented by two members and their boroughs by one. Conversely, densely populated areas called rotten boroughs were overrepresented, and key industrial hubs such as Manchester and Birmingham were underrepresented. This contrast is the result of Westminster Parliament not having a set mechanism to ensure seat allocation reflected population patterns and voters. Furthermore, plural voting essentially gave some people the ability to cast more than one vote by allowing them to vote in numerous constituencies, as the entitlement to vote back then was given to any man who owned land that is worth more than 40 shillings. Examples of these people include business owners, property owners, and some recent graduates. This imbalance of representation was later compensated in 1832 when the Great Reform Act was passed. The 1832 Act addressed the issue of rotten boroughs and gave representation to new industrial cities. The 1832 Act, however, maintained plural voting and did not introduce equal-sized constituency. Thus, the limited vote was introduced through the passing of the Second Reform Act in 1867, whereby electors' votes needed to be one less than the numbers of seats that needed to be filled. The Third Reform Act then went on and abolished limited vote and established the first past the post system as the dominant electoral system that should be used in the UK. With that concludes my introduction for the first past the post system, and now I will pass it on to Ariel, who will be discussing the advantages of the first past the post system. Thank you.
Hi, good day to everyone watching. My name is Ariel and I'll be discussing the advantages of the first past the post system, which has long dominated the United Kingdom political scene and is still used in numerous countries, including the United States, India, and Malaysia. While often criticized for its lack of proportionality, the first past the post has several enduring strengths that explains its resilience. Firstly, we believe that the first past the post system has the ability to form a strong and stable government. It is because the system favors larger, more established parties, which generally results in one party obtaining an effective parliamentary majority. This enables governments to be effective without having to be sustained by vulnerable coalitions. A reliable illustration is the 2019 United Kingdom general election, in which the Conservative Party took 56.2% of parliamentary seats on just 43.6% of the general electorate, gaining an unambiguous mandate to put into effect its policy proposals, according to Dr. Savita Pandey's journal article on the impact of electoral systems on democratic representation. Such arrangements lead to political stability and decisive policy making, which allows governments to act quickly on their manifesto commitments, as exemplified by the passage of the Electoral Reform Act in 2022 under Boris Johnson's Conservative majority. Moving on, another major benefit to the first-past-the-post system is simplicity. Voters and electoral officials alike can easily understand the process where one vote is placed by everyone for one candidate, and the candidate who wins the most votes in each constituency wins. The ACE Electoral Knowledge Network stated that simplicity is the advantage of first-past-the-post system, as it is easy and comprehensible for voters, and there is less confusion, which translates to public trust in the electoral processes. Complex systems such as proportional representation or mixed member systems tend to confuse voters and make the occurrence of spot ballots more likely. This is demonstrated in the report by the Electoral Reform Society, which recorded around 3.5% of ballots were spoiled in the Scottish Parliament elections in 2007, as opposed to 2% in the council elections, which therefore reflects the higher spoilage due to confusion among voters in the additional member system. Moving on to our next point, we believe that the first-past-the-post system strengthens the relationship between elected representatives and their local constituencies. Voters have an easily recognizable MP who is personally accountable to them, which promotes personal representation and facilitates it to be able to connect with and access their representative more easily. As Van der Hout and de Swart elaborated in their journal article, Characteristic Properties of First-Past-the-Post System, written in 2012, this aspect of the first-past-the-post promotes political theorists' call of substantive representation, whereby the elected representatives are duty-bound to act on behalf of the overall electorate in their constituency, in contrast to merely mirroring the demographic composition in the population. Their research describes the first-past-the-post as one in which district-level responsibility is favoured, whereby the voters clearly understand who their MP is and can hold him accountable in the subsequent general elections. Lastly, the first-past-the-post voting system is well recognized as low cost to administer by reason of its simplicity in ballot design and vote tabulation. More elaborate schemes such as proportional representation or ranked choice voting necessitate more than one choice by the voter, and the winner is the candidate who receives the most votes, which eliminates the necessity for elaborate calculations, rounds of multiple counts, or costly education campaigns to familiarize voters. A report by Democratic Audit UK states that the median yearly price to administer UK elections between the period 2009 to 2013 was about £150 million, equal to £591 per vote, which is significantly less than more elaborate systems. Besides that, a report by the House of Commons also indicated that UK elections are under the administration by the first-past-the-post are relatively inexpensive, costing many others less per elector than Australia, where preferential voting is mandatory and elections themselves are relatively more costly. All this affordability, combined with the simplicity of administration, is one of the lasting practical strengths of the first-past-the-post. To conclude, these advantages demonstrate why the first-past-the-post is still highly sought after in spite of its disadvantages. That is all from me, and I will now pass it on to my groupmate Chiu Mei Xuan, who will be discussing on the weaknesses of the first-past-the-post system. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Priscilla, and I'll be discussing the weakness of the first-past-the-post, herein referred to the FPTP system. Harold Wilson, a prime minister who personally benefited from the FPTP system, shrewdly identified its fundamental flaw when he noted its record of producing disproportionate results. While Winston Churchill's famous quip reminds us that no system is perfect, Wilson's observation cuts to the heart of the democratic critique of FPTP. It's not merely a theoretical issue. The system disproportionality recreates a cascade of democratic defeats that distorts the will of the people, disenfranchise millions of voters, and wrap the political landscape of the United Kingdom. The core weakness, as Wilson pointed out, is the profound disconnect between the number of votes a party receives nationally and the number of seats it wins in Parliament. FPTP is a winner-takes-all system in 650 individual constituency contests. This inevitably leads to results where a party can win a large share of the national vote but gain very few seats if its support is spread thinly across the country, rather than concentrated in the specific constituencies. The 2024 general election provides a stark, recent example of this. The Liberal Democrats won over 12% of the national vote, but this translated to just 11% of the seats. Even more dramatically, Reform UK secured over 40% of the vote, more than 4 million people, yet won only 5 seats, less than 1% of the House of Commons. As Professor Stephen Quinn notes in the 2024 article in Parliamentary Affairs, this feature of FPTP becomes increasingly problematic in an era of party fragmentation, where two-party system is factoring but the electoral system cannot cope effectively, punishing emerging political movements. This disproportionality is a direct result of the millions of wasted votes that FPTP creates. The Electoral Reform Society, a prominent campaign group, calculated that in the 2019 general election, a staggering 71% of votes had no impact on the outcome. These are votes cast for losing candidates or surplus votes cast for a winning candidate beyond what they needed to secure their victory. This systematic flaw has a deeply corrosive effect on voter behavior and engagement. Knowing their vote is unlikely to matter, many are focused into tactical voting instead of voting for the candidate or party that truly represents their beliefs. They vote for their least bad option who has a realistic chance of winning. This fundamentally undermines the democratic principle of expressing a genuine preference and gives a distorted mandate to the winning government. Furthermore, this winner-takes-all logic divides the country into a patchwork of safe seats and marginal seats. Hundreds of constituencies are considered safe for one party, having not changed hands for generations. Consequently, major parties concentrate their resources, campaign efforts, and policy promises on the handful of marginal or swing seats that will actually decide the election. As research from the Hansard Society has repeatedly shown, this creates an electoral desert where voters feel ignored or taken for granted, leading to political disillusionment and lower turnout. If your vote has never made a difference and is unlikely to ever make one, the incentive to participate diminishes significantly. This inequality of votes, where a vote in a marginal seat is vastly more powerful than one in a safe seat, is a direct contradiction of the democratic ideal of one person, one vote, one value. The Electoral Commission, as the independent body overseeing UK election, does not advocate for or against specific systems. However, its impartial data on election results and turnout provides the crucial evidence that lays bare these weaknesses. The statistics they publish after each election fuel the debate and confirm the mathematical reality of disproportionality that critics highlight. Ultimately, the most extreme weakness of FTPT is potential to produce a wrong winner election, where the party that wins the most votes nationally fails to win the most seats, as happened in 1951 and February 1974. This is the system's logical flaw taken to its most absurd conclusion. The fact that the UK's electoral system can declare the less popular party to victor is a damning indictment of its democratic credibility. Given these deep-seated flaws and the disproportionate results, the millions of wasted votes, the encouragement of tactical voting, and the certain of safe seats, it is clear that Harold Wilson's critique was not just an economic observation, but a description of a system that actively distorts representation. This reality, becoming more acute in our modern multi-party politics, forces us to confront a crucial question. If this is how our democracy functions, How can we reform it to make it truly representative? Thank you. I will pass the floor to the next person.
Hi everyone, my name is Riani and I'll be talking about potential reforms that can be made to the UK's current general election system. Firstly, one of the main criticisms of the first past the post system is that a candidate can win an election even without more than 50% of the votes, as can be seen with the pie chart on the slides. In this situation, even with no majority support, the Red Party would win. This issue can be solved by adopting the two-round system, which makes it so that if no candidate in the initial count receives a majority vote, a second round of voting is initiated, often weeks later. In this second round, voters can only vote between the top two candidates from the first round, which are the red and yellow parties in this case. This ensures a clear majority winner. Additionally, this system allows voters to vote genuinely in the first round without the pressure to vote for the lesser evil, as they know they will have another opportunity to influence the results. On top of that, the French have utilized this system for presidential elections with success since 1965. Besides that, there is another more radical and complete reform to the first past the post system, which is the alternative vote system. Similar to first past the post, each constituency elects a single representative. However, instead of choosing just one candidate on the ballot paper, voters are asked to rank the candidates by preference, such as first, second, third choice, and so on. During the initial counting of votes, first choice votes are counted. If there are any candidates that receive more than 50% of first choice votes, they are immediately elected. However, if no candidate achieves an absolute majority on the first count, an elimination and redistribution process takes place. This is where the candidate who receives the fewest first choice votes is eliminated. Votes for the eliminated candidate are then reallocated to the voter's second choice. If there is still no majority after this, the process repeats until one candidate receives over 50% of the votes and wins the seat. This method would ensure that in each constituency, the elected candidate has the support of the majority of voters in that area, rather than just a plurality. As mentioned before, the alternative vote system would address the issue with the first past the post system, where a candidate can be elected even without a majority support, which potentially leads to constituents being unsatisfied with the voting system. This problem significantly contributed to Australia's reasoning for adopting the alternative vote system for their elections. And it is also used in Ireland for presidential elections, displaying its effectiveness when properly utilized by Commonwealth countries. Furthermore, the alternative vote system can allow voters to cast their votes without the tactical pressure of worrying about wasting their votes on a candidate that might not win, as their votes will be transferred to their next preference if their first choice is eliminated. Other than that, this system of voting can incentivize candidates to appeal to a wider range of voters, because even if they're not their first choice, they can still be their second or third, which could potentially lead to fairer and less divisive political campaigns. However, that is not to say that the alternative vote system is without its faults, as one of the drawbacks of this system, besides the fact that it is a slightly more complicated process than first past the post, is that it operates as a majoritarian system and does not provide proportional representation. This is because while it ensures a majority winner within a constituency, it does not guarantee that a party's national share of seats will accurately reflect its national share of votes. This problem of disproportionate representation is shared by first past the post. In fact, in some cases, such as the 2015 UK general election, the alternative vote system could have actually produced less proportional results than first past the post. Nevertheless, as R.M. Punnett states in his journal article, if a proportional electoral system is unachievable, the alternative vote system remains in the wings as a more limited reform option. Furthermore, in 2011, a referendum was held in the UK on whether or not they should switch to the alternative vote system. The public actually rejected this proposal, with 68% voting against the change, indicating a lack of public support for the alternative vote system, at least at the time. Nonetheless, it has been 14 years since then, and if the referendum was held again now, public opinion might be different. That's all from me. Thank you for listening. Next, my groupmate Ashley Sue will talk more about possible reforms.
Hello everyone, my name is Ashley Sue and I will be talking about one of the possible reforms to the electoral system in the United Kingdom currently. As said by the former Prime Minister of the UK, Harold Wilson, and discussed previously by my fellow groupmates, the current system has its demerits, especially how it leads to disproportionality in the results. It seems this displeasure with the current system is shared with many from the UK. This can be seen in a local council election in England, where parties that have committed to the first past the post system, like the Conservatives and the Labours, lost, while parties that have committed to the electoral reform, like the Liberal Democrats, won. As said by Professor Richard Murphy, the people have spoken through this election. One of our suggested reforms is to change the voting system to the single transferable vote system, which now onwards I will refer to as STV. As said by Nicholas Tideman in his journal article about STV, it is a system where voters will rank their choice of candidates according to their preference for a multi-member constituency. Preferential ranking, combined with transferable votes and a multi-member constituency, can allow for proportional representation. The STV is used in Northern Ireland and Scotland, as well as outside the UK like the Republic of Ireland. Unlike the current system, STV allows for several representatives of one constituency. The process of the STV entails establishing, firstly, a quota of votes. A quota is a number of votes for a candidate to be elected and is calculated using a formula. For example, if a quota is 50 votes and a candidate gets 55 votes, they would then be elected. Surplus votes would then be transferred to the next preferred candidate on the voters list. Following the example above, the 5 extra votes would then be transferred to the second most preferred candidate on the respective voters list. As the STV system is a system that allows for multi-member constituencies, if all the seats are not filled, then the elimination process begins. This process removes candidates with the lowest votes and transfers these votes to the voters' next preferences until all the available seats in the constituencies are filled. Highlighted by James W. Endersby in his journal article, one of the largest issues in the current electoral system is that most people feel that their votes are wasted. For example, if a particular party gets 40% of votes but is not the majority party and therefore does not win, the portion of the electorate who voted for this party will lack representation of their views. The STV allows for a diversity of views in the constituency to be represented, as there are multiple representatives for each constituency. As FPTP is a system where only one party can win a seat in the constituency, one may say it incentivizes parties to manipulate the drawing of district boundaries to secure the singular seat available, known as gerrymandering. In contrast, with STV having multi-member constituencies and an allocation of seats proportionally according to the votes, it lowers the likelihood of gerrymandering, as votes are transferable. STV, of course, does have its weaknesses. Comparatively to the FPTP system, it is so much more complex, and this has been a large source of the electorate's hostility towards the STV. However, a study has discovered that there was not much evidence of confusion amongst the Scottish and Irish electorate where STV has already been implemented. From this, we can surmise that although the STV may lead to hesitancy in the beginning, it may not necessarily lead to voter confusion. Another concern is how the STV may violate monotonicity, which will not happen in a simple system like the first past the post system. In STV, a candidate may actually benefit from not being the first preference vote, depending on the dynamics of transferring of votes. Subsequent transfers may lead to a domino effect where a different candidate who gained lower votes may actually win. However, as noted by David Klemperer in his report, this is quite a rare occurrence as can be seen from the Northern Ireland's experience of implementing STV. In summary, every voting system has its flaws. Although the STV may have a few downsides, we believe its merits make up for it and can be one of the reforms considered. Allowing for a multi-member constituency with preferential voting can represent the diversity of opinions in voters that are present in the United Kingdom. Through this system, we believe no voices will be silent and no votes will be wasted. Thank you. That's all from me for now. I will now pass it on to my groupmate Ryan.
Hello, my name is Ryan. I'll be comparing the first past the post or FPTP system in the UK with its application in two other Commonwealth nations, Malaysia and Bangladesh. While all three use FPTP, there are still institutional differences which influence them. For Malaysia, they differ in their system, constituency boundaries, and party system. Firstly, in regards to their system, the UK elects 650 MPs to the HOC using FPTP. The candidate with the most votes in each constituency wins, regardless of a majority. This system is simple, quick in results, and usually produces single-party majorities. Crucially, the UK Electoral Commission, created by the Political Parties Elections and Referendums Act 2000, is independent and accountable to Parliament, though the 2022 Election Act allows the government to help with strategy and policy statements. Appointments still involve multi-party input and oversight by the Speaker Committee, helping preserve its neutrality. Malaysia's Dewan Rakyat also uses FPTP to elect 222 MPs, with the highest vote getter in each constituency winning. However, as for the Election Commission (SPR), formed under Article 114 of the Federal Constitution, is appointed by the Yang Pertuan Agong on the Prime Minister's advice, with consultation from the Conference of Rulers. This gives the executive considerable influence, raising questions about impartiality. In practice, this has affected the implementation of FPTP. The SPR has limited enforcement capabilities, particularly regarding campaign finance and electoral fairness. As a result, the system can disproportionately favor dominant parties. As for constituency boundaries, a key feature of FPTP is that each vote should carry equal weight, but this depends on how constituencies are drawn. In the UK, independent boundary commissions redraw boundaries periodically to reflect population changes and maintain fairness. In contrast, Malaysia's SPR controls its own redistricting, leading to accusations of gerrymandering and malapportionment. For example, GE14 rural constituencies with far fewer votes than urban ones carry equal weight, often benefiting the ruling Barisan Nasional. Scholars like Muhammad Fairuz Mat Ali and Muhammad Agas Yusuf, in their journal article Malaysian Electoral System Reform and the Challenges of its Implementation after the 14th General Election in 2022, have highlighted these distortions, showing how FPTP's winner-take-all nature, when combined with biased boundaries, can undermine representativeness. Lastly, Malaysia's multi-party and ethnic-based political system also interacts with FPTP differently. FPTP tends to reward geographically concentrated support, and in Malaysia, parties representing specific ethnic groups can win many seats with relatively low national vote shares. Additionally, vote splitting among opposition parties enables minority wins. For example, in Kepala Batas during the GE14, BN's candidate Rizal Merican won with just 37.1% of the vote, as opposition votes were split. In the UK, the dominance of Labour and Conservatives reduces the impact of vote splitting, allowing FPTP to produce more stable majorities, albeit with some disproportionality. Now, as for Bangladesh, first in regards to their system, second on their electoral integrity. Firstly, Bangladesh elects 300 MPs using FPTP with 50 additional reserved seats for women, allocated proportionally based on party performance in the general seats. Parties internally nominate women to fill these, as stated in Article 65, subsection 3A of its constitution. While this isn't traditionally FPTP, it's a hybrid meant to promote gender inclusion. The Bangladeshi Election Commission is established under Article 118 and headed by a chief election commissioner appointed by the president. Again, on the Prime Minister's advice, as in Malaysia, this creates potential for executive overreach. Furthermore, Bangladesh's implementation of FPTP has been marred by serious concerns over electoral integrity. In the 2018 general election, there were widespread reports of ballot stuffing, opposition arrests, and media suppression, all allegedly benefiting the ruling Awami League. Nazma Akhtar, in her journal article, The Crisis of Independence and Impartiality of the Election Commission of Bangladesh, a study on the 11th national parliamentary election, written in 2023, highlighted not only domestic criticism, but also a 2020 US State Department report, which concluded that the election was not free and fair. These issues undermine one of the core assumptions of FPTP, that the winning candidate reflects the genuine choice of the electorate in each constituency. In the 2024 election, the opposition, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, boycotted the polls altogether, citing a lack of trust in the electoral process. This resulted in low voter turnout and a largely uncontested victory for the Awami League, illustrating how a flawed electoral environment can break down even a majoritarian system like FPTP. By contrast, in the UK, despite criticisms of FPTP's disproportionality, the Independent Electoral Commission ensures basic electoral integrity. Elections are widely accepted as legitimate, and opposition parties participate in every contest. Allegations of fraud or systemic bias are rare, and when raised, are addressed through transparent, legal, and institutional processes. As a result, FPTP in the UK continues to function within a stable and credible democratic framework, unlike the escalating political crisis seen in Bangladesh. Fortunately, following 2024 student-led protests, the Yunus-led interim government replaced the Awami League with Badiul Alam Majumdar leading electoral reforms to restore trust in Bangladesh's first-past-the-post system. Thus concludes our presentation. We hope you've learned something about the first-past-the-post system from it, and thank you so much for listening.